All right, I'm just getting us live on YouTube here in a minute. Okay, we are live on YouTube. And today is February 18th. And this is our Finance Committee meeting, and it's 9:03. And present we have Trustee Harper or actually not trustee, Mayor Pro Tem Harper and Mayor Cranker and Gloria Koshberger. So we can begin. I was going to share my screen so that it's a little bit more interactive for our online viewers. And find it here. Okay. Okay. All right. Not sure how to just share that portion of my screen, but that's okay. All right, so our first agenda item was our sales tax. As you can see, we are up this year, and last year was a very successful year in sales tax. Does anyone have any comments or questions on our sales tax to date?
I don't think so. Looks robust. Again, I really appreciated when Willie Tukey did kind of that adjustment for inflation, and I think you did that with the state of the town too. But I think, yeah, that's positive news.
Great. All right, we will go into our next agenda item, which is the memo of the financial overview. And I wanted to point something out, so I'll share my screen so I can point this out. The memo in the packet didn't include one number which got us to the ending fund balance. So in that very first general fund overview of the 2024 projected budget, predicted an ending fund balance of 652,702. The 2024 December financial statements estimate an ending fund balance of 772,897. And so in the packet, it didn't include that 51,999, which is going to be split from the water and sewer accounts. That's the lodging fee that was in there. So wanted to define that. I do want to give a disclaimer that these are not the audited numbers and should be treated as estimates only, since not all year-end transactions have been received. And that includes revenues and invoices. So this is kind of an estimate that we're going over right now, and I just want to keep that disclaimer out there. I did review all of this with our town accountant on Wednesday before this went out. So she is in. She helped me adjust some numbers and including that ending fund balance, which is why it wasn't updated in the calculations there.
So again, just to be clear, the 1.05 million is the balance, but then we're taking out the housing authority transfer, the lodging fee transfer that will go to water and sewer funds, and the 175 is the
and we have an outstanding balance with CAT financials.
Yeah, the 175.
So the 175 is our balance that we just paid with CAT financials, but was not recorded yet in the December financials.
So that gets us to the 772,897 number as the estimated ending fund balance.
Correct.
For the general fund.
Correct. But that is just the base estimated fund balance. And so in our budget, we did predict a revenue of about 338,000. But that also included revenue 177,000 from the tax improvement or the transportation impact fee. And that was put, so I separated that out because we now have a streets budget. So we put that in the streets budget. So I will walk through this memo with you all, just so that we can all kind of talk through it and understand how I got to all of these numbers, if that works for you all.
Great.
And then back up is there are the financial statements in there. I do have my notes in the financial statements, and they might have gotten a little some of the comments might be a little outdated because I didn't update them after I talked with our accountant. So just wanted to put that disclaimer out there as well, that I might have changed some of the comments, after I talked to the accountant. So we'll start out with, our projected ending fund balance for 2024 is 772,897. So the comprehensive financial policies that we adopted in November state that we want to keep at least 25% of our general fund revenues for a reserve in our ending fund balance. So this is also a reserve for all of our enterprise accounts. It's not just for the general fund, but it is 25% of the general fund. So I wanted to kind of highlight that. We don't have a reserve in any other account. Like our water and sewer, they do not hold reserves. We do have a $26,000 reserve in the sewer, but that is just for our loan and per our contract with USDA. And that's being held in a high interest account. All right, so 25% of the revenues in 2025. So we came up short in 2024 with 25% of our revenues, which was fine, but we are now recovering it this year. We did that by doing quite a bit of cuts to our general fund budget to recover those costs and get us back into a healthy reserve balance. So 25% of the revenues for 2025 is going to be 929,877, and the budget's predicting an ending fund balance of 991,000. So we are on track to keep that 25% revenue for 2025, actually recovering that from 2024. So I would applaud the trustees for the hard work they did on the budget this year to make that happen.
Yeah, and just again, a note for anybody listening, the past several years, we as a board had been approving a budget that exceeded, expenditures that exceeded our revenues. And that was intentional. We were spending down the fund balance. But for 2025, that's why we kind of tightened things up, because we couldn't continue to keep spending down our reserve indefinitely. We can't keep continuing to pass a budget where our expenditures exceed our revenues.
Correct. And then I'm going to bring us back to our financial statements here. Just to go over a little bit more of the general fund with you all. Because I feel like the more eyes we have on it, the less likely we are to make mistakes.
Something that just stood out to me is just a reminder, because I kind of think of these things overall, is again, these are estimated numbers. These are not the automated numbers, but overall, we had 3.9 million in revenue for 2024 in the general fund. And we had 4.2 million in expenditures in 2024 for the general fund. So again, that's an indicator that we were spending down our fund balance by 330,000, because that's the difference between our revenue in 2024 and our expenditures in 2024.
Yes. Okay, and so just some of the things I wanted to highlight in our financial statements. So you'll see this number here. Yeah, you can see my screen. And so that is what our total, I just kind of want to help you all read this because it is complicated and we don't really have ClearGov anymore. So I thought it would be good to kind of explain how to read these financial statements, since they can't really change the format at this point. But basically this right here is our ending fund balance for 2024. That's cash on hand, ideally at the end of the year. But we did reduce that because we know we have some outstanding invoices. So that's how we got to that 772 that we talked about earlier. We'll go into the general fund. So this column right here is 2022. The first column is 2022. The second column is 2023. Period actual is the quarter. So that's, actually that's the month. That's the month that we spent those funds. And then year-to-date actual would be the end of December. And then what we had budgeted over here. And then the next one is the percentage of that has been expended or collected from what we budgeted. So as you can see, some areas we are over. This is like 111% over in our tax collection. License and permits were about 154% of what we budgeted. And then we get down into intergovernmental revenue. Oh, and I wanted to point out that in the license and permits, this says 126,000 for lodging fees, but that the allocation towards water and sewer has not been taken out yet. That's the easiest way our accountants could think to separate that out is at the end of the year, not as it comes in.
So it gets categorized month to month here, and then at the end of the year, we reallocate.
And then we reallocate at the end of the year. Yeah, I'm trying to make that happen more in more real time, but that's a little out of my control.
And so that number is the 126,000 minus the 51 or whatever the actual number was, which would be allocated to water and sewer.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And then as we get into, and then we didn't have someone to submit their license fee for marijuana. That's why that one's low. But intergovernmental revenue, still working on how to budget for the grants. We had budgeted 446,000 in grant funding. We did not receive 446,000, even though we were probably awarded that. But we didn't receive that because most grants are reimbursed. So we don't get the check up front. We have to submit for that. And that includes the brownfields as well. So brownfield, we only did 53,000 last year worth of work. But what I'm trying to do this year is separate each individual grant so you can really see that those revenues and expenditures a lot clearer. And I didn't budget over this year for a grant. So you're likely not going to see this kind of 52% down here of what we've collected.
Right. It throws off our formulas, our projections, our percentages, even though it's not super precise.
Yeah. All right. And so then charges for services. We did have a very successful revenue collection in these areas. So we had a pass-through policy for engineering that is in the expense reimbursement there. And that's where we received. And so you'll see engineering higher down in our expenses, but we recovered those costs here because what pass-through means is that we charge the applicant for the time that we needed an engineer to review their application or their project.
Was this number driven by a few bigger projects or how has the pass-through policy worked? Has it largely been contained to a couple bigger projects, or has it really been for a number of projects that, again, we're building on more complicated lots in town, so it gets a little?
This is primarily for bigger projects right now.
Gotcha.
So we just implemented this in 2023, and this is kind of our first year of recovering those costs, which really benefited us here. Because we did over $20,000 worth of engineering that we were able to then recover our costs for that.
Right. It means that broad taxpayer base is not subsidizing an individual project.
Yeah, that is the goal, that it's paying for itself, really. Then as you can see, we had a couple actually large code enforcement infractions. And so that's boosted this number up from our budgeted 2,000 to 19,000. Kendall Community Center rent still going really strong here last year at 43,000, and then still not quite enough to get us where we need to be on repairing that building. And then the ski lift tickets actually did really well last year compared to, given the fact that we had to close down for most of the year, so.
All right. Right. So, and I had a question about the community center rental. Is this increase in revenue, do the new fees account for a good bit of it, or does demand account for it, or both?
The new fees would have accounted for some of this.
Yeah.
And then also we booked it pretty solid last year as well. Whereas years past we
Mhm.
hadn't, but the new fees are definitely accounting for this increase in revenue there.
Yeah, and with the lift tickets, again, that is healthy considering we had months we couldn't operate. But we also did carry some of those credits into this year for some folks because their passes
Yep,
weren't applicable.
that was, in 2024.
Yeah.
So you'll see, in 2022, we had about $41,000
Mhm.
worth of sales of ski lift tickets. And that also actually includes our rentals as well, since we have to use the same program.
Oh, it
So-
does.
Yes.
So what is Kendall Mountain Ski Area concessions? Oh, no, wait. Oh, that's zero, right? Because we're not running concessions. Sorry, that's, never mind. Okay.
Yeah, so that includes our, like, you'd think it would be, the equipment rental down here is more for, our,
Like public works equipment,
no,
renting chairs.
renting chairs, renting, no, we have a line item from chair rentals, but it is separated out. I
Mhm.
can't think of what it is right now, but
Yeah,
the lift tickets does include our ski rentals.
yeah.
Because it's all run on the same system, so it
Mhm.
goes into the same line item.
Mhm.
Right, so we did do an adjusted, I had 60,000 here, but then I found out it was more like 51,000. So, we did do a adjusted total revenues down here,
Mhm.
about 3.9. But that 60,000 is actually 51, so.
Okay, and again,
Okay.
the DOE prize shows up here too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the DOE price is in there.
So that changes that budget quite a bit for miscellaneous revenues.
That is not in the miscellaneous. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
is, it shouldn't be called miscellaneous, but yes.
Yeah.
And it is separated out from grants since technically it's not a grant. It is just a prize.
And we got that as a lump sum. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then we split it with SNPA, Eco Action Partners and the county to facilitate our Team Gold initiatives. So.
Mhm.
All right, I don't think I had anything outstanding here in the first page of our expenditures. So this is our expenditures. And you can see that as it goes into these 10 line items here. We did spend a little bit more on our CPA, but a lot less than years previous, which is really cool. Because our new CPAs are a lot less expensive than previous ones. So very excited about that. Didn't quite hit our budget with our legal. We did go over on our professional services and community development
Yeah, I saw that one.
by quite a bit.
Yeah.
Some of that was for the code rewrite, but a lot of that was just them doing our planning. I think wetlands was a part of that too. We had what other projects did we have going on at that time? But yes, we did go quite a bit over on that one. This year, we don't have CPS. They're not with us anymore, so we don't anticipate that line item to be as high this year, but I wanted to point that out, that last year we did go over.
And again, I think it's just a reminder to the community that like the whole budget as a whole has contracted. And so even the level of just, staff doesn't have that additional capacity that CPS provided. I think Lucy will be able to take on the projects and work very effectively, but just recognizing that in a whole variety of areas, the budget's been contracted for a lot of departments.
Yeah. And then I wanted to point out on the general government operations, it looks like we went way over on our insurance. But what I had done was trying to do the workers' comp broken out into each of the line items. So you'll see like up here, I had $1,000 budgeted for community development, but that didn't get taken out of that line item. It all got taken out of this line item. So still working on our communication on line items. And this year we did, right at the beginning of the year, we did GL code kind of reference guide for our clerks so that when invoices come in, we can do that correctly in the future. But I also was told that that wasn't realistic to go out to separate out the workman's comp in each department. So it will be reflected in that main line item in the future, hopefully. Okay, visitor center, senior center, they did get a grant, for their grow dome, but we did have to spend some money there, last year. So just kind of wanted to, point that out. And then our electricity bill went way up, since the grow dome installation. So it's something I just wanted to highlight there.
So here though, do we see reflected the grant revenue or, because like here, it looks like we're spending a decent amount, but like, where is it reflected if they're reimbursing us?
Yeah, so that is up here, intergovernmental revenue, and that was, I think, just included in the general grant revenue.
Okay,
I don't think we broke it out.
yeah, that's fine. It just saying it's fair to say that like these expenses look high, but they also were supported by grants at the same time.
Yes, but I don't think we got as much back from the grant revenue or from the grant than we had anticipated. So we
Okay.
spent more than we wanted to, honestly,
Gotcha.
in that area. Going on here. Where else?
It struck me with, let's see, some town hall stuff, like, we didn't spend as much in like repairs and maintenance as we anticipated. Custodial was a bit higher. There were just a couple areas where it struck me as like, it seems like we have some deferred maintenance things here too, that, we didn't spend as much as we thought we would in some repairs and maintenance. And again, that's fine because we're trying to cut expenses, but it also makes me think like we need to keep thinking about our old buildings and how we take care of them and how we allocate funding to them.
Yep.
If
Yeah,
we're
some of this
continuing to
stuff-
like push it off because it's not completely broken, except for the buckets that I walked by of the town hall roof when I came in. So
Yeah, we thought
It's
we had that
tricky.
fixed and it's
Yeah.
not.
yeah.
No, and I hear you on that. The custodial, we did a lot of deep cleaning last year. Which was honestly probably deferred maintenance in
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, still learning, still working with Sarah on coding things correctly. So, what I'm most concerned about is this bottom line on each of these that says, that we have town operations, and that's 80% expended
Mhm.
than what we had budgeted for. So, how we allocate within those lines is really the discretion of the staff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's that bottom line that I really want people to be kind of tuned into,
Yeah.
of each of these bottom lines. So,
And again, in some areas, we're looking for efficiency. It's great news if we spent 80% of what we budgeted. And in other areas, it might mean that like, hey, we didn't do a project that we really eventually need to do, and we need to be thinking about it for the future.
All right, so this is we're starting to, I'm on page 10 now, but starting to break out each one of these grant expenditures so that it's very clear. We closed out our GoCo grant last year. And our DOLA EIF grant last year. So, and Main Street, we get grants every year for that now that we're a Main Street community. So that's exciting. Let's see, keep going. What else was I gonna show you all? Oh, Caritas, we had an overage in our repair and maintenance. We had a giant garage door repair that wasn't anticipated. Building and code officer, we've got 6,000 here. That was the purchase of the fence for Silverton Square. And we're still waiting for a reimbursement on that. Could be a year, could be 2 years. But so, so still looking down here, 95% expended, 94% expended of what we budgeted for. We didn't have as much overtime last year. So I look at those numbers and say, congratulations, John, you didn't go overtime on your guys as much as we thought you were. So that's a good mark for the crew there. Keep going through here. One thing we did do last year was put this 22,500 down for the dump truck. And then we financed the rest of it. Our goal had been to look at the end of the year and see if maybe we could pay it all off. But after looking at our financials, I think it's just added to our expenses moving forward.
So we're just gonna keep financing.
Yeah. I mean, that would be my recommendation. So 89% spent on streets. 89% of our budget was expended for streets. 82% of our budget was expended for facilities, parks and rec. We'll go. Then we had our in park maintenance on page 13. We had a capital improvements, that's our showers, and you'll see that there's a line item up in the revenues that show that we actually paid for ourselves, our showers last year. So next year or this year, it should be all revenue. And then we had some technical services, and that included our lift repair. And that was pretty much half of what we had anticipated spending. We had been quoted 25,000 and we only spent 13. So, really shout out to Grady for helping us out and, making that affordable.
And the 175 here is the deck.
Yes, and the 175 down here is our deck. And a lot of it was shoring up the, what do you call them? They go into
Pylons.
Pylons,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Communications and events. So it says regular employees. That also includes our Nisi Park attendant that we had last year, which we contracted with the Visitor Center for. So we expended 82% of this budget for the communications and events. We did not contribute to our future capital outlay last year. So we did not contribute that 25,000. And that is specifically for the perimeter trail. We do have $50,000 currently saved for the perimeter trail. So that's a good chunk of money to keep in mind as we go and look for grants. And then long-term payments, like I have a note here, it is the invoice is 175,000. It is more, and we're actually asking Kat why it is more than we anticipated, because we did pay off one and we should have gained equity on it, and it looks like they're charging us for that the full price instead of taking in our trade-in.
Yeah.
And so it's still in the works of like how that's working out moving forward. So like I said, we're still working on our invoices and everything from last year. That'll be sorted out here soon too. And then we did have to make that refuse transfer last year of 106,000 to keep the refuse in the black, but then you'll see my memo that it didn't work and we still have about $50,000 outstanding there. We are waiting for some more payments coming in as far as bill pay on your utilities, so that might help, but I doubt we'll receive as much as we anticipated.
Yeah.
There were also dumpsters ordered last year on the town's behalf, and we had to then call Bruin and be like, no, we didn't actually order those. So that was a little miscommunication. I think community members were really excited about getting trash taken care of and charging the town for it. And Bruin wasn't as responsive, thinking that it was coming from us. So we're still working through, some things are just out of our control sometimes. But working with Bruin on the people that are actually allowed to order those dumpsters moving forward.
And so total fund expenditures, once you add in the invoice for CAT, you anticipate it's closer to 4.2 million for expenditures, and we had budgeted 4.38. So I think that I give a shout out to staff as well for managing the budget so closely. I think that's important just to acknowledge, is that like, we didn't go over, we were under what we anticipated. And so I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I think I did panic a little bit in the fall when I realized the $500,000 being a part of our ending fund balance
Mhm.
and that we were going to come up short in 2024 for what we wanted to keep in reserves.
Mhm.
So I did kind of put the kibosh on a lot of spending.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I mean, I think it is an example of strong financial management in, and adjusting throughout the year when we get new information.
Jim, how about you? Any comments on the general fund? Oh, you're muted. Yeah, I know.
Sorry about that. No, I was going to say, having been through the process 5 times now, a lot of this is repetitive, and I don't mean that in a bad way. So no, I don't have any questions per se. But I think what we need to stress and what the town needs to understand is A, we're not broke, because I've heard that a bunch. We're certainly not broke.
Mhm.
We have done better than most communities across this nation in making the hard decisions, making those tough calls, cutting back where we need to cut back, while still providing the services that a town is designed to provide. We're doing it. The staff is doing it. You're doing it. It's a good thing.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, we're not broke. We're just trying to be financially responsible.
Absolutely. And anyone will do that in their own life, but they expect something different at this level, and that's just not realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we'll move on to the library fund then. So library fund had an ending fund balance of 16,000. We had predicted it to be higher. We had predicted it to be 23,000 at the end of the year. So the accountant and I are still kind of going back and forth on what happened there. We're thinking that maybe we didn't have the 2023 audit right, but so we're looking at the discrepancy there of about 7,000. Not a huge discrepancy, but enough to cause us to look into it and see why that's a lower fund balance, ending fund balance than we had predicted, because the library did not spend any more than they had been allocated in 2024. So I hate to say like it's kind of up in the air, but it is still up in the air. One thing to point out is the library did receive over $15,000 in grants last year to support their programming. So if you're wondering, where's all this coming from the library? Well, Misty is just hitting the pavement with grants and asking for money. We did allocate less this year to spend down their fund balance, but we might have to bump that up a little bit in order to get them in the black, since their ending 2024 fund balance was less than anticipated.
Mhm.
Right.
And the overall approach with the library is that it doesn't necessarily need to have an ending fund balance per se. It needs to have a transfer for the appropriate amount that it costs to run that.
Right, it's not an enterprise fund.
Right.
It doesn't have any fees that are being collected and putting
Yeah.
back. Your late book fees are not paying for the
Right.
entire library, unfortunately. We are subsidizing it.
Yes, yeah, yeah. It's a line item for the town.
But it is something to keep in mind in our capital improvements plan as we look at replacing the building. The whole library will be part of that capital improvements plan so that we will be saving for that, just not in the ending fund balance.
Yeah, yeah.
Next, we'll go on to the Housing Authority Fund. This was brand new in 2024. And so since we share a lot of our first of all, the office space, we share benefits. We provide the benefits as the town while the grant provides the salary for our director. So there's a lot of shared, as well as like any engineering services, some of that's shared. And then planning, like they work really well together, but it's really hard to break that down budget wise.
Right, how much time Lucy spends on housing authority stuff versus.
Right.
Yeah.
So 2024 is our first attempt to try and break it up a little bit. In 2025, you'll see was a much more robust budget coming that was approved. So it's just a new entity that we have that we need to start separating those things out, but not all of them can be separated out yet. So this is really, think of this as an extension right now of the general fund. That's why I removed 51,000, because you'll see this number here, which is net revenue over expenditures is a negative 51,000 that came out of the general fund, basically. Does that make sense? Okay.
I mean, we're basically doing the same thing for the 2025 budget. It's just that we allocated it at the beginning of the year.
Correct.
Yeah.
Instead of making a budget in the middle of the
Transfer,
year.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I think it's gonna be a lot more clear next year on where the housing authority is and where the general fund is, like,
Yeah.
split wise.
Yeah.
And we will be subsidizing the housing authority to some extent this year. All right, the Conservation Trust Fund, so this is our ending fund balance here is the 81,000. That is from the lottery. There are discussions right now on at the state legislature of reducing the amount to in the lottery fund, and I'm not sure, or reallocating some of the lottery funds. I know that it has gone down over the years, but we still are receiving our same amount. It's about 7,000-8,000 a year, but it adds up in a high interest account, so. We'll see where those discussions end. We did plan on expending 29,000 last year, which we did not do and actually won't do because CDOT and the town had a project identified to restore a dead fen, to give CDOT some credits, to give the town some credits, so that we could potentially develop out our wastewater plant area. But that fell through. CDOT was able to just purchase their credits, which we asked if we could, and they said no, but CDOT could, because of the type of the project that they were doing. So we might be able to revamp the project. CDOT did give us all of the current work that they have done, which is about $24,000 worth of work that they've already completed on that site. So we're still in discussions on what that looks like, and that'll come back before the trustees once we figure out if there is even a path forward. Mullis Lake Park, a strong ending fund balance of 316,000. As I've dived into this park fund, it looks like it's not a true enterprise fund. It looks like it was set up as a special revenue fund, which makes it a little different. If it was an enterprise fund, we would be able to transfer that fund, the extra funds back into the general fund. But since it's a special revenue fund, it has restrictions on what we can do. So we're trying to find the original document that established the Mullis Lake Park Fund to make sure that we could potentially, if we wanted to, you could use those excess funds for other things rather than capital improvements just at Mullis. But we're still researching that, and I wanted to kind of point that out. So we did receive about 91% or 95.1% of our revenue that we anticipated at Mullis, which is very close to what we budgeted. And then our expenditures were lower than what we budgeted. We spent about 95% of our budget. The cemetery fund, this is our ending fund balance. I didn't highlight that, but it's 55,000.
I noticed we had some expenses in there. Were we able to do some of the improvements that?
Yes,
that
we
the-
did contract
Great.
with John Richardson's, who we contracted with for some masonry repairs.
Great. And that was the operating supplies line item. Great.
Then we have our streets fund. This is new this year, and this is specifically created for the traffic impact fee. So as those fees come in, they will be put in the streets fund and it will go right back into Blair Street so that Blair Street, either street, any street, actually.
All the streets.
All the streets, as we need them. So we'll hopefully see this grow significantly this year as the EPA keeps telling me we have money coming in the hundreds of thousands, but
Seen the check.
I haven't seen the check yet, and I'm still waiting for the check. And then we were kind of being like, maybe we should charge interest. We haven't seen the check, but we're joking. We're not charging interest at this point. It is a threat, though. Then moving on to our water fund. So our water and sewer funds are true enterprise funds. They are a little bit more difficult to calculate your ending fund balance because you have assets in there as well. So we, in enterprise funds, your assets are included in kind of your ending balance. So you'll see this ending balance of like 1,381,000. You'll be like, wow, that's amazing. But that also, you can see it includes improvements other than buildings. So that means capital improvements, improvements other than buildings, capital improvements.
It's not stuff we can sell for cash. Like,
Right.
it's not cash in the bank.
Right. And so that's why in the memo that I put in there, the actual cash, so it's funny because the accountants would say, well, you don't have an ending fund balance, Blair. I'm like, okay, well, what is our cash in the bank at the end of the year? Is what-
We can
how you
call
have
it
to ask
something
us.
else. Yeah.
But it's basically for our water fund, it's 159,000. And that is taken by adding those two lines at the top and minus any liabilities. We don't have any liabilities in either of these counts. So it's these two line items at top that we add together for the cash in the bank at the end of the year. This is great. We had predicted negative at the rate we were going, and we are in the positive, which is awesome. We are not gaining ground as fast as we should in this account, but I think with these new EQRs, we will start recovering some more funds.
I think I calculated like our net revenue was $11,000. I mean, again, it's better
Yes.
that it wasn't negative, but that is not the number we need to move forward with the kind of infrastructure investments we need to make.
Correct.
$11,000 a year is not going to get us very far very quickly for the kind of investments we need to make, but it's not negative. So way to go.
We didn't have as many taps in 2024 that we had budgeted for, so that's why that number is down there. As well as we don't have the lodging tax include, or the lodging fee included in here yet, so that will get transferred over.
I had a question about this. I think I noticed in the building permit line item that was a pretty robust line item telling me that like a number of building permits had been issued, but then the tap fees are reversely down. And so I was just curious.
You'll see about a year delay in that. So
Okay.
the year before, we had a ton of taps. John was overwhelmed.
Fewer building permits.
Right,
Yeah.
fewer, and
Yeah.
then the next year, they're actually starting to build. But
Yeah.
then we have fewer building permits.
So they're not a yearly alignment
Right.
per se.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll see about a little bit of a delay.
That's helpful.
Because once someone puts a tap in, we start charging them for water and sewer.
At the base rate and
Right.
EQRs. now.
Right,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
is to incentivize them to build.
Right.
So,
Uh-huh.
but you'll still see that delay because a lot of the times they'll get their tap in the fall
Mm-hmm.
and then they won't be able to develop until the spring.
Mm-hmm.
No outstanding, or no overages, of note in here. As I'm looking at these line items, or the totals at the bottom of each of these categories, we didn't really have any overages. So that is good. You'll see though, at the end of our year, we did have a negative $18,000 into our fund balance. But we do anticipate that to be covered by the lodging fees coming back over.
And that's for sewer.
That is for water.
Wait, oh, water. Yeah. Yeah, Jim.
May I, thank you so much. I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump back really quick. we're going now into 2025, and I know that there were businesses that were protesting previously approved lodging fees, previously approved not tap fees, but water and sewer fees. Will all that be resolved so that we can have real numbers going into 2025 and real expectations? I feel like
Are you talking about the handful of businesses that were exempt from the lodging increase by the trustees, and they only had a year? And that was a lot of like VRBO types that already had their places booked. Is that what you're talking about, Jim?
yes.
Okay, good.
And that's saying it nicely. Yeah, I mean, I think that whole, I have my own personal feelings on that. But I really want to go into 25 with true numbers, everyone paying into the system, so that we as a community can all benefit from these programs and changes that we have put into place.
Yes, so they're now charged for that.
Okay.
They only had 1 year grace period.
And then I also understand that there are businesses that are essentially protesting, call it something else if we'd like, but they're protesting the water and sewer fees and the EQR codes. And you know, that's nice, but we're moving forward with this, and those businesses are going to pay, correct?
Yeah, we don't exempt anyone from payment of their bills unless they bring it to the trustees and the trustees say that they don't have to pay that. But staff wouldn't administratively just say you don't have to pay that or anything like that. So if there are a handful, we'll definitely bring them to the trustees for that consideration. But so far, I think just those businesses contacting us, working through their numbers with Steve, has been really helpful for both sides to understand it.
That's what I wanted to hear.
A lot of admin work, but I think it's definitely worth it to explain everything.
And it's
Thank
a
you.
big change potentially for some folks, and I appreciate your comment, Jim. And I just want to continue to articulate on the record that all of our efforts thus far with our fees have really been to try to make sure all of us are paying our fair
Right.
share. And so if your bill as a business has gone up significantly, another way of looking at that is that you've been getting a great deal for a while. And so again, it's just an effort to make sure we're all paying into the system, because the numbers don't lie when it comes to how much it costs to operate the system and how much we charge all of us in fees to pay for it. We have to have these funds be sustainable. They have to be in the black, and we have to be planning for future investments. And we're working on all the different levers that we can pull to try to make it the most sustainable. But we're really trying to make it the most fair and the most sustainable for everybody.
And yeah, collecting $11,000 a year in our water fund is not going to get us very far in saving for just the maintenance of our facility.
It doesn't cover hardly inflation.
Yeah, so
Like our
That's it.
fees have not covered inflation over the last 10 years.
that's true.
So,
But we're
Thanks,
getting
Jim.
close, which is really exciting. I was very excited to see this 2024. and
As a
feel like
positive?
We are in the black in these two accounts, but
Oh.
that's what I've been working for these last 3 years. So
Yeah.
feeling great that we're finally starting to see like the fruits of our labor.
Yeah, but again, inflation.
And the inflation's killing us. So again, in the sewer fund, we have our cash pooled plus our accounts receivable added together, and that is our ending fund balance. So water and sewer are pretty much aligned on their ending fund balances right now. Does not, again, down in taps. But it also, we had to do a supplemental sewer budget because we received our USDA loan and didn't account for that here. So, we have this interim loan proceeds of 151,000 that we started the project last year. So you'll see that going up, but it's exciting that we didn't have to subsidize this at all so that we could actually take out a loan, because if we had to make a transfer from the general fund to the sewer fund, we compromise it as an enterprise fund, which was scary. And then we wouldn't have been able to take on debt, but we are good. We made it past that hurdle, and now we're starting to see this account be more in the black, which will help us with our future funding of a wastewater treatment plant.
I think too, just to put it on like finance committee meeting record request, is that we talked a bit last year about the administrative fees and how those play out. And those are one lever that we can pull to kind of adjust general fund balances and enterprise fund balances. And so I think we did what we needed to do for 2025. I would be interested as we go into 2026 budgeting. Once we have the EQRs, once we have a better sense of what kind of revenue that's going to generate, taking another look at the admin fees to really make sure we as a group think that they are where they need to be. And that staff has, a recommendation of like, this is what I think they need to be, and we can kind of answer that question. Again, so that's future planning. For this 20,000 for the debt service, is that the balance we need to like have?
No, so that's what we had to pay in order to issue the debt.
Okay.
So that's our bond attorney. And that
yeah.
actually gets repaid through our USDA loan. So you'll see the expenditures here, but it's coming back to us through the loan.
Great.
And that's here too. The collection system project is 57,000 as well. And you'll see down here, it was reduced. The admin fee was reduced last year to 211,000. From 272 previous year. So
Yeah, we did
a
reduce it.
significant reduction of about
Yeah.
60.
We weren't able to reduce it as we originally discussed, but it is reduced.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so we did come out negative 6,000, but that also doesn't account for now it's about 25,000, that 26,000 that's going to be put into this account from the lodging fees. So I know it's kind of hard to talk through all the financials when we're not quite there yet, but this does give you an idea of where we're going. And it also lets you know, like, we don't have that extra funds to spend this year that we had thought maybe if we had extra funds after 2024, we could evaluate that. This is really showing us we don't have that.
And so just to clarify, the net revenue in water was around 11,000, I think. And the net revenue in sewer, we have the 30,000 that we would add back in here from the lodging fees minus the 6.9 thousand that we were under. So the net revenue for sewer is around 24,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Around there.
Yeah. And that's accounted for in the not ending fund balance, but the cash on hand of,
That actually is not accounted for. Actually, the 30,000 is not, or the 29,000 is not. So.
Okay.
And that number we're still working on. So I received that quote from the accountant, but she said, hold on, we're still working on this. So these are definitely estimated numbers. So I definitely want to keep that disclaimer out there. The refuse fund is the most concerning fund right now. I'm really proud of the stuff we've done to address our water and sewer, and we have started with the EQRs last year, but we are still losing money in this fund significantly. And it also brings us back to the philosophy of providing refuse service in such a remote area. It is going to be costly. It is going to probably not be the service that we think that we are paying for. And how do we grapple with that? Do we always have a line item that comes from the general fund to support this? This year we did took some measures, and we are charging each one of our departments for their trash use so that that's not absorbed in the general budget of refuse. And so that the average citizen isn't paying for town hall's refuse.
Mhm.
And that's also a philosophy discussion we could have as well. But bottom line is we're paying our contractors about 300,000 and we're only receiving about 200,000 in revenues.
Mhm.
Um,
And that number has gone up year over year.
correct.
I mean, 9 to 10%, is that fair to say?
About 12% in the last 2 years, at least.
Total or each year?
Total.
Uh-huh, yeah. And again, I understand inflation, costs are going up, it's hard to service this area, et cetera, but it just our contracted services here continue to go up. I hear comments from residents about level of service and our fees that we recoup for this is $100,000 less than what we get charged for it. So that's just concerning.
Yeah, and we're gonna need to definitely have a larger conversation in budget time on how to manage that. I am looking at several grants right now that would pay for someone to be out at the transfer station, town-owned or town representative that, as well as a point of sale system and a security camera that would allow us to take money right there and also maybe give them code enforcement infractions to anyone illegally dumping. So trying to cover it from all ends there.
Can you clarify the kind of ending fund balance, I guess you could say, for refuse? Because I think, so on the page you were just looking at, it was negative 18,000.
Mm-hmm.
But then the summary, I think in the memo said it was negative 50. So is that the cumulative?
So what you're seeing, the negative 18,000 is the net revenue for
Right,
that year.
Right. Which is
So
in the
that
red.
doesn't necessarily say we were already low
Yeah.
that year.
Yeah.
And that made us go lower.
Gotcha. So we had a negative balance of 50 minus 18 already.
Mm-hmm.
We just continue to have a deficit.
And
The
that
deficit
included
is
$100,000 transfer from
The
the
general
general
fund.
fund over
Right.
to the.
So really, like, again, our deficit is greater and our
Mhm.
deficit continues to grow.
So this is something that we would like to work on this year and first of all, make it more efficient. Second of all, make sure we're recovering our costs in every area. And then last resort would be considering a rate increase.
Now, we already did, how have these numbers been affected by the EQRs we implemented for refuse?
And that was just for businesses.
Right,
So we haven't actually done that either for residents.
right. But we are slightly better off this year than we would have been if we hadn't done that.
Yes. Yep. Slightly.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's, I think our priorities should be to balance the refuse fund. And I've been talking about this for 3 years, but
Mhm.
honestly, the main focus was our water and sewer funds. And now we're just needing to really look at our refuse fund. All right. That is your 2024 financial overview. Any questions or comments from the committee?
I like it. Towards the beginning of the report, there was a little footnote on the side that said that the MJ taxes weren't submitted or reporting wasn't submitted.
That's correct.
Do we have like fines in place for late reporting and stuff like that, whether it's?
We do, yes. We're actually going after one of them pretty aggressively right now.
Okay. Perfect.
They decided to pack up and leave town, so
Good.
we're trying to track them down, but yeah.
Mhm. Let me see if I had any questions. I think we covered everything. Oh, I did notice, because sometimes I think the budget tells an interesting story about what might be happening in our economy, with our businesses, with building. So I noticed that vacation rental fees were up. Do we have any senses if this is due to just price increase of our fees or because actually the number of rentals has gone up?
Well, we haven't increased our fees. So that was, it might have been too, I don't think I budgeted correctly. I don't know why I put 17,000. I think that was supposed to be 27,000, honestly, or I was going off of 2022 numbers.
Yeah,
So I will look into that, but we
I mean,
haven't
it's not
increased our
urgent.
fees. I also think that I didn't budget for it correctly.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's just sort of like, what story do the numbers tell? And
Mhm.
sometimes you have to tease out. If there's a ton of building permits, that's an interesting story. If there's a bunch of significant increase in vacation rental permits, that's an interesting story.
Yeah, and for your retreat, and we'll publish this after the retreat as well. I do have quite a few slides showing kind of our business licenses, our land use applications, our building permits. So we can look at that kind of comprehensively and
That's great.
trying to get those numbers. I'm looking at it right now, but
That's great.
Yeah.
I think this is a great job. The memo is really helpful. I think hopefully it helps people understand kind of where we're coming from. I just echo, Jim, what you said. We're not telling a story that the town is in dire straits. Our revenues are strong. Some of that's informed by inflation, but our revenues are strong from online sales tax, from in-person sales tax, from all those things. And we're still just having to be fiscally responsible. And we've come out of COVID, we've made it different priorities, and I've been really proud of this board, this committee, to have the hard conversations about what we're doing, where we're going, what we need to invest in, where we need to spend our money. And I think too, Gloria, you've brought a lot of transparency and accountability and also a realization that we have to make tough choices. Because when your revenues are strong, you still have to decide where you're going to spend the money. And I think we, as the previous board, really focused a lot too on staff recruitment and retention. And I think that's been a big way that we've been able to get a whole variety of things done. And there's always going to be challenges and levels of service in a small community like that, like we have. But I think that we've really been able to manage some really big projects, built the first building that's been built in the community for 20 years. We've made investments that needed to be made at Kendall. They weren't sexy, right? They were things we'd had planned for years. So they didn't really feel like anything new, but yet they were new investments and the price of them had gone up significantly. And so I just think recognizing all the different things we have invested in is helpful to people, even when they're feeling like some of the cuts and changes or rate increases we've been made have been painful. I just think this board is really attentive to how these things feel to the community and the hard decisions we have to make to be financially responsible and plan for the future.
I couldn't have said any better. I totally agree with you. And I do want to add that we are not the only community facing these tough decisions. We're not the only community in the region, in the state, in the nation that are having to raise rates across the board. This is just where we're at. Just where we're at.
Yeah, I was actually chatting with Pagosa Springs on their
Yeah.
water. And I mean, they're going to have to be astronomical as
Mhm.
far as what they're doing as far as raising their rates. When I told them our rates, they were like, oh, yeah, we're about the same. And I was like, no, ours is every 2 months. And they went, oh no, we're not the same at all then. So, yeah, I think this is kind of a systemic problem across the nation of aging infrastructure and trying to
Absolutely.
with everything. So,
Well, and I think the one thing that over other communities where Silverton has the absolute advantage is the fact that we really do have this connectivity with one another and that we do care. We see it on a one-to-one basis, and we're doing everything we can to really to minimize that impact on our friends and neighbors around us. That also includes us. Where when you have larger communities, you may not have that that one-on-one.
Well, and I really applaud our staff and Gloria's leadership and the efforts of the committees we've had, whether it's the Personnel and Ordinance Committee, whether it's the Finance Committee, Public Works Committee, Utilities Committee. Like each of those committees have had community members, businesses engaged, come and give feedback, give examples that helped inform the conversation. Like we are listening. And like you said, Jim, we do care. And I think the work that Steve has done to sit down with different businesses and kind of walk through what this looks like and help explain it. Again, there's the reality of what we need to do. And we also appreciate hearing the reality from our fellow neighbors and business owners about what this looks like for them and the compromises that we can make. And I think what's really helpful is this is just such an approach of trying to do what's best for everybody, the collective good, because that's all we have to work with, and not favoring one interest over the other or some louder voices over the other. And I just really think our staff has done a great job for that. And none of it's going to be perfect, right? There's more nuance that we could add to the EQRs, but we really needed an approach that got these funds sustainable for now. And you know, I say this over and over, we're so small, so we don't see really the benefits of economies of scale. These businesses employing a staff member, it costs a bit of the same, whether you're 1,000 people or whether you're 600. And when you're 600, we all have to pay more than we would if we were 1,000. And that's just the reality. And we face the challenges of having limited negotiating power because we're so small and we're so remote. And we see that for the town. We see that for our local business owners, whether they're trying to get, food shipments back up here when they say they're not going to service our town. So I just think we have to remember that we're kind of all in this together to be a bit scrappy and recognizing who we are and what we all have to work towards together.
And we're all affected. It's not us and them or vice versa. We are all affected by these.
Yep.
By these decisions. So it's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing to know that we're in this together.
Yeah. And I think that
to steal someone else's quote.
That Region 9 report, about livable wages and housing costs and all that, just recognizing that, again, it's hard to make the money you need in this community with our seasonal economy. It's hard to find the housing you need in our economy. So it just, all these different things that we're all facing. We're trying to work on them.
All right.
Thanks, Gloria.
Yeah, and we did have scheduled vendor permits to talk about vendor fees. Because we've received quite a bit of feedback on that, but we weren't able to get it in on this finance committee meeting. Would you all feel comfortable with us bringing that straight to the board? It's just an adjustment. Awesome. All right, we will bring that on the 10th then, March 10th, it'll go to the board. And it is 10:10 and we can adjourn our finance committee meeting. Thank you all for your time this morning.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you guys. Have a great day.